Welcome back to 8 Cubes. We talk about all of the most important topics in Marvel Snap. Let's get into it talking about the new card, Bruce Banner, a 2-1 that has a 25% chance to transform into the Hulk when you skip at least one energy on a turn. Lamby, do you think that this could revive High Evo, keeping in mind how much I love High Evo?
Man, honestly, the thing about High Evo is that it's such a in my opinion, it's such an entry level deck in the sense whereby it's a very straightforward game plan that it's good for beginners to pick up the game, and to a certain extent you can also kind of win games like in the later stages of the game. But like it's such a simple deck. Okay, it's such a simple deck. And what Bruce Banner does for this deck is it doesn't change the fact that the deck is still just a simple, like, just float energy every turn kind of deck. But now you add a little bit of a curveball in there, which is that you now have a 25% chance of turning your 2 mana card into 12 power, which is not the most fun thing to play against. To be frank, because like at the end of the day, like you want to be able to know your maximum power output, right? Like as your opponent or as yourself, like you want to know how much points you need to put in a location. Whereas how Bruce Banner is just like you don't know. You don't know if you're gonna get a +11 there or it's gonna stay 2-1 for the remainder of the game. But of course, high evo decks are the ones that definitely have the best way of utilizing this card because you just naturally want to not spend all your energy anyway, right? So I do think that it's worth experimenting, but further down in the topics, we'll be talking about one card that really just like I mean it's Red Guardian. Red
A
Guardian
little
really
bit.
makes this
Yeah.
Red Guardian really makes this card very difficult to play, but I will be playing with this card. I will get this card. I don't have any expectation for this to become a meta tyrant at all, but
Mhm.
it's gonna be very interesting to see people mold when I transform my 2 mana card into a 12 power unit.
I think the thing that really sticks with me when I think about Bruce Banner is it's sort of like if you gave High Evo Athena that fit with what High Evo wanted to do. In the same way that Athena goes in like all of these decks that like it already wants to be playing Kitty Pride stuff, Athena goes in there. This is like a Athena, but it works with High Evo. And the analogy to Athena works on two levels. The first is it's a 2-drop that can get to 12 power. That's like, okay, pretty straightforward. There's the Athena analogy. You got it, right? The second is it gets totally blown out by Red Guardian. But I
Yep.
think the difference is this card is all or nothing. Athena can be 6 power. Athena can be 9 power. So this card is going to be worse in its archetype than Athena is in her archetypes, is sort of where I'm at on it. The question is it good enough, or does that archetype need it enough that it still gets played anyway? One of the other dynamics with Bruce Banner that I find very interesting is when you think about how often you're supposed to stay on a 25 percenter, like just
Mm-hmm.
equity wise, if you have a 25% shot, how often are you supposed to, on the final turn of the game, make a play that wins if you transform Bruce Banner and only if you transform Bruce Banner, but you know it'll win when that happens? And I think that little mind game is pretty cool too.
Yeah, but the thing about that is that like you said, right, it's 25%, and I was counting like the amount of like turns you have a chance to like transform this card. It's like
Yeah.
turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. Honestly, not very often turn 6, but I guess you can maybe build around that a bit because turn 6 you want to play like the real big Hulk, right? So it's about 3 turns for Bruce Banner to potentially become a 212. I think it's good enough odds, right? Like if you think
Yeah.
about it, like for it to just completely stomp out the game. Also the funny thing is if you let you float the energy on turn 6, this can't be Shang-Chi at all. So like if it transforms at the end of turn 6, it's kinda I think it's the most painful thing to lose to Bruce Banner that transforms at the end of turn 6 because you really cannot do anything about it at all
You
outside
could
of Red
Red
Guardian.
Guardian it.
Outside of Red Guardian, yeah, but
like, but yeah, like we know how I feel about High Evo on this channel. I love High Evo. I love the idea of there being a card that upgrades these basic cards. I know that it's been very power crept. I know there are now 6 drops that are as good as High Evo Hulk. I know there are now 3 drops that are as good as High Evo Cyclops. I understand that. But at the same time, it is the kind of thing that I wish could be around. And this is so clearly a card that goes with it that they're even in the same cache, which, by the way, great job, do that more. There should be more
yep.
synergy between the stuff in caches and the stuff in caches. Like one of the big misses in this case was specifically with Surtur and Scar. Scar was just simply not in caches. Surtur came out. There was just nothing you could do. Not missing on that with Bruce Banner, I think, is a really good thing to do. Just have that other card available to them in that same way. There are a lot of restrictions that the current Marvel Snap economy puts on the ways in which you can design to make it better for players, but doing stuff like this more often would be a net good for sure.
Yeah, I want to just throw one more thing out there for Bruce Banner, which is it's just interesting to think about how you snap with this card, right? Are you supposed to snap the moment you play Bruce Banner? Are you supposed to, that kind of thing? Because if you snap the turn you play the Bruce Banner, it's like they don't even know if they can stay, because like what if it suddenly becomes a 12 and you lose, right? But like, or are they supposed to take the chance that it doesn't become a 12 and you just stay? That kind of thing. It really just throws more like intricacies into the game plan of High Evo, which is generally a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah, like snapping after Bruce transforms on turn 3 is a ticket to winning one cube city. But also,
Exactly.
look, one cube is one cube. That's a cube that you won instead of a cube that you lost, right? If you think about it like that, look, it's not much, but it's better than losing. And Haivo does a lot of losing otherwise.
A lot.
Doom 2099 review. This is usually where people look at us to make their final purchase decisions of the week, so I'm going to approach it with that seriousness in mind. Doom 2099 is, in my opinion, a staple in ARCHEYPE, a likely staple in Scream, and a potential staple in Mr. Negative. I do not particularly expect Doom 2099 decks to be the single best way to play midrange. I expect, of the 4-drops, and we'll talk about this later, Anti-Venom and potentially Wiccan to stick around in greater numbers than Doom 2099, but I do group him with them. And so if you're one of those people that is like, oh, I regret missing out on those, this is a card that is similar to them. It has a prescriptivist playstyle. You have to play it a certain type of way, and it rewards a certain type of game plan. I generally am not interested in hyper investing in it with Zabu and Psylocke. I am interested in the shells that get to do it sort of as a free addition, where in Mr. Negative it's raising the floor, in something like Scream it is also raising the floor, in RSM it is part of your nut draw, stuff like that. That's sort of where I envision his long-term success being. I think he is quite strong. He has raised the floor of many decks. He has sort of pushed the metagame in an upwards direction, but I don't think he is like, oh my god, WTF, what a mistake second dinner.
Yeah, this card is definitely a good card. Let's get it out there first. It's a good card, and I've been playing a lot of Doom 2099 in like mid-range shells just to test it out and stuff like that as well. I realized that the issue with Doom 2099 like decks in mid-range decks is that they have a real problem about going tall enough. Like very often these decks are about 20 points average on the locations you want them to be 20 points, but there are many decks that just go above that, right? So, and the thing is, you're very tunneled into only being able to play one card a turn, which means that your deck building is very spoken for, like, and your opponent also kind of knows. Like every time I see someone play Doom 2099 on 4, they play something on 5, I know like 90% of the time the Doom is coming down on 6. Like you just know, and you can sort of count. I'm not saying that like the points is always beatable, but it's very predictable. It's like super duper predictable. Like even in the first like 48 hours since the card release, like the moment I see someone play Psylocke on 2 and snap, I'm like, all right, Doom's coming down on 3, like that kind of thing. So this card is super duper predictable, and I think KM is right in that, like, in the long run, this card might see home in shells that are not exactly really very mid range. Like you mentioned, all those decks like before. But for now anyway, I personally think that Doom 2099 is it's actually pretty. I honestly think it's actually a good pickup, to be honest. Like I've been finding it like just a very easy card to play and very easy to snap with, and then you can just climb the ladder with not too much effort. But that being said, also I do think that the card ceiling is not very high. Like after a while, people really get used to playing against this card, and honestly, if we can just like give a spoiler for the next topic. The next topic we'll tell you a little bit about how we beat Doom 2099 anyway.
This is a card that is at baseline strong enough to make the meta react to it in very pronounced ways. That usually means it's worth picking up. I do think that this is the kind of card that can be worth picking up almost regardless of what your collection is, because even if you don't have all the sick, nasty Scream stuff, Doom 2099 in your Spectrum deck is still probably better than anything else you're playing at that level. I think that is a real argument in its favor. I also think that it is the kind of thing that has very clear vulnerabilities. US Agent, obviously, every bounce deck that can go over the top of it. There's a bunch of stuff in terms of playstyle that makes this hard for Doom 2099 to ever be the best deck in the game because of the ways it is easy to play against. We talked last episode, I believe, about the general awkwardness of Wiccan decks because they aren't able to run tech as efficiently. And that applies even more strongly to Doom 2099, who really wants you to do 5-drop, 6-drop, and not play Shang-Chi Shadow King. And that is a real limitation on what this deck can ever be. It's only ever going to be, I'm getting a bunch of points. It's not ever really going to be doing much more than that. And cards like that are only worth investing in if they are a proven and very good way of getting points. Long way of saying Doom 2099 is a very strong and very good card, but I do think that he is very far from the freakouts that we saw on day one.
Yeah, agree. I think just want to add one last thing here, which is that because you mentioned a point about whereby Doom 2099 really wants you to just like play a 5-on-5 and a 6-on-6, right? Like, I think a lot of people watching this video who have Doom 2099 would have experienced this exact scenario that I experienced as well, whereby there are sometimes you really just want to play 2 cards on turn like 6 to go taller, but by going taller, you lose the board, and by losing the board, you lose power throughout your entire board. Because the board is all Doom boards anyway. So you want to go tall, but you can't play 2 cards because the board needs to spawn. So that's the restriction of Doom 2099 that makes it a little bit like initially you don't feel it because it just feels really powerful that all the bots spawn everywhere. But after a while, you'll be like, hey, I actually kind of want to just like go tall in these 2 locations, but I don't have control over that.
Fun fact, I believe you can scam that with Invisible Woman. The same way that, Athena won't proc if you play a card in a Dark Dimension and then a card outside of Dark Dimension. I believe you can scam Doom 2099 with Invisible Woman. It might be something worth looking into. So with Doom 2099 coming out, there's a bunch of decks that are just able to get like 24 power into every lane, which means that every deck rising up to try to meet those decks is just a deck that either plays US Agent or goes super tall. There are plenty of decks that are doing both of those things. I think we should talk about just that general concept, but more specifically, let's talk about our favorite versions of those decks. And I'll start with Move Bounce. I think Move Bounce is sort of the example of this kind of deck. And the reason for that is that it just has the highest high rolls and is the most unbeatable and the hardest to interact with when it goes off. There are points of interaction with Move Bounce, right? Like if you can get the Red Guardian onto that Madam Web early, that's a really good thing to do. If you can set it up such that you're actually able to meaningfully play tech cards against them, that's a really good thing to do. If you Cosmo their Beast lane, that's very obviously a Beast lane, that's a really good thing to do. But all in all, the deck is very good at getting a lot of points into its hand on the final turn of the game, and then sort of just winning because it has a lot of points and they're in its hand and you can't do anything about those points that are in its hand. And I think that is sort of the model that all of these go tall decks are chasing.
Yeah, I wanna add on to that whole Move Bounce like topic that you just mentioned, because I've been hovering around like top like 1,700 stuff like that. So I actually got to play quite a bit of like against quite a bit of Move Bounce players recently, and I swear to God, right, like it's impossible to beat them. Like it's not if they don't even have to play perfectly. It's like the moment they know you're a Doom 2099 deck, right? The Move Bounce player just literally calculates every breakpoint in their head, and like their deck just is so good at going tall, and you literally cannot do anything against it. Like I'd be facing down like 20 plus power daggers, maybe a torch that's like 16 and some other random stuff. Like the Doom 2099 like mid-range stuff never beats that. Like they just know. Like the Move Bounce players are so confident into this Doom 2099 deck because they just know that they are taller. I've also experimented with the idea of just playing like standard bounce, with the whole Toxin Falcon Beast, and just like playing a bunch of 1-drops, bouncing normal stuff, and maybe even hit Monkey as well. Like that also very easily gets above Doom 2099 decks because you easily go like 20 plus power in 2 locations very easily. So like I've been playing normal bounce, and that's also okay in the Doom 2099 stuff. I mean, not to mention this one is gonna be quite embarrassing, but like I actually struggle to beat Destroy as well because there's no way.
Yeah.
there's like literal no interactivity of the Doom 2099 mid-range shell in versus Destroy. Like the Destroy deck literally just does their own solitaire thing, drops the death, drops the huge whatever thing on the board along the death, and you just die. So
Yeah.
like it's actually very easy to go taller than Doom 2099 decks. Doom 2099 decks just feel like, in my personal opinion, circling back to the previous topic as well, which is it's very easy to play and snap with. So over a long grind session, you kinda will accumulate some easy wins just because the deck is like, easy to play and simple. But if you like break it down and realize the amount of good players that you're actually beating with this deck, you're not really beating many good players with this deck. At least that's what I noticed.
The floor is really high, but the
Yes.
ceiling is really
Super low.
And so,
Super low.
like, the difference between the floor and the ceiling, like, not a lot. It's a very good dumb
Not
guy
a
deck.
lot.
It's
It's practically
very
next to
good.
each
Yeah, like,
other.
if you're not very good at this game and you're like, I kind of suck, Doom 2099 is your guy. Like, if you're self-aware enough to be like, I'm really not that good at this game, I don't really know much about stuff, Doom 2099 might be the card for you. The worry is, and I think this is the other thing that Doom 2099, you talked about how confident these move bounce players are into it, right? That's the real strength of everyone playing against Doom 2099 is that it's so obvious what it is and what it's doing. And so if you're snapping your Doom 2099s and they're playing one of the decks that beats it, you're just like, oh my god, my snap equity is negative. I snapped into instantly losing. And
Exactly.
that dynamic is really unpleasant for a Doom 2099 player right now. In this context, I think it's worth taking a step back and evaluating what I consider the three main 4-cost mid-range build-arounds. And those are Anti-Venom, Wiccan, and Doom 2099. And I put those in a rough order of like how good I think they are. That's my personal list. You don't need to really stick by it or not stick by it. But what I like about these cards is they incentivize different things and they go with different things. Anti-Venom incentivizes you to play Luke Cage, but also to play abilities that are impactful rather than bodies that are impactful. Wiccan incentivizes you to play Quicksilver, which is obviously a very unique thing, but also to play big guys and small guys so that when you have that extra energy, you get to use it efficiently. Meanwhile, Doom 2099 incentivizes the dumbest of all dumb guy strats, play Arrow into Doctor Doom, which is awesome. I love that, right? Like that's super sick. And I think that like it's a very cool dynamic that like if you're building a deck, you can now look and say, "Huh, does what I'm trying to do fit with any of those things?" And there's like you can add them in or not add them in, but there are decks that were not good with Wiccan, were not good with Anti-Venom, but are good with Doom 2099. Like you can't run those two cards in RSM or Scream, but you can run Doom 2099. And there are decks that are good with those cards that aren't good with that would not be good with Doom 2099. Like you can't really play an Ajax Doom 2099 deck. That's not what you want to be doing with that. And so there's a very, in my opinion, unique suite of build around 4-drops right now. And I think it's worth pointing out because like that's all in the last 4 months. They're making some really interesting cards in there.
Yeah, I feel like I just want to talk a little bit more about, because in my personal opinion, the 4-drop, because since we are talking about 4-drops,
Yeah.
right? Like the 4-drop like direction that I really like going for right now, it's stuff that works really well with Zabu, in my opinion. It's like the earlier the 4 you play, the better it gets, So that's why
Yes.
I actually have this very huge soft spot for Doom 2099, regardless of all we've said so far, because it's like a snowbally card that gets better if you play it with Zabu. So Galacta's another one. I know no, we didn't really mention Galacta above, but like I do think that Zabu Galacta interactions make like the card way stronger, just because Zabu incentivizes you playing an earlier Galacta. Like you don't really need to play an earlier Anti-Venom. You can play Anti-Venom on 4, it's fine. But like Galacta, Doctor Doom, 2099, you really want to play those cards earlier. And I'm a big fan of Zabu, so I kind of like gravitate a bit more towards like decks that can play a benefit from the early 4. Yeah. I think one more thing that's a bit underlooked, and I also because Doom 2099 is like back in the scene, it's like on the scene right now, is Iron Lad. Iron Lad actually has been made a bit of a
Yeah.
resurgence recently because it's just another Doom 2099. It could be, I mean, but most of the cards in the game right now benefit off of being hit by Iron Lad. There's like so many good cards that benefit off of being hit by Iron Lad right now. So I've been playing a lot of Iron Lad as well. Yeah, the 4 cost slot now is so competitive. I mean, obviously you can't obviously run all of these in the same deck, right? But like I do think like even in each of these shells, Wiccan, Doctor Doom 2099, and like the Anti-Venom stuff, like there are like selections to choose from, right? It's not like it's a clear cut. You only have to run sit so and so force. Like you can run an anti-venom deck with like different types of force. You can run a Wiccan deck with like the Galacta stuff or not the Galacta stuff. Like it's very flexible. So I think just the range of 4 cost cards that we have in the game right now is so big, and there's a lot of room for exploration just because we can have so many of them are playable right now essentially.
I remember way back in the day praising Marvel Snap's original 4 cost design. Because we had like, Jessica Jones and Crossbones and Rescue and all of these different 4 drops that were basically, I'm gonna go on a quest and I'll pay you out if you go on that quest, right? And now I'm praising Marvel Snap's 4 drop design because it's those, but they're like signpost cards for archetypes.
Yes.
Anti-Venom is an archetype. Wiccan is an archetype. Doom 2099 is an archetype. And I think that, first of all, when you look at those cards, you look at the previous numbers that I mentioned, you can see there's been a lot of power creep in that way. But I also think that, like, 4 has often been a very contentious spot in Marvel Snap. Part of that's due to Zabu, part of that's because Darkhawk came out as a 4. And I kind of feel like they're really hitting on 4 drops recently. Like, these are
Yeah.
not busted. They're really good. They're fun and unique, and they do similar ish stuff as build arounds, but they all feel very different. It doesn't feel the same to play Anti-Venom as it does to play Wiccan. It doesn't feel the same to play Wiccan as it does to play Doom 2099. They're doing similar stuff. It doesn't feel the same to play Galacta as it does to play any of that stuff. And like, I don't exactly know when it happened, but they started really, like, they're in a real groove with those 4s right now, I feel like.
Yeah. You know what 4 cost guys actually need a bit of help? If you think about it
Mm.
this way, right? The 4 cost guys that randomly generate stuff need a lot of help. Like if
Oh,
you look at Nick
God.
Fury,
Yeah.
you look at White Queen. Like okay, so
Oh,
Anti-Venom is it's like 4 mana, draw a card and make it cost 0 and you can play it for free, right? Iron Lad
uh,
is become a Doctor Doom sometimes. But like 4/6 White Queen, add a random card to your hand. Like I can't remember, Nick Fury is 4/6, 4/5? But
Nick
like
Fury's a
add
4/6.
three, yeah, add 3 random cards to your hand. Like what is the fine line to make these things better to match up with the other 4s that are playable right now? Because clearly 4/6 add random things to your hand is nigh unplayable right now.
Give White Queen a point of power, please.
I don't even think it's enough, man. I think it has to be 4/6, discover the highest cost card in your opponent's hand and reduce the cost by 1. I think it has to
You
be
think you gotta
that.
give Valentina text?
Yes, it has to be that, yes.
Oh man. I mean, like, maybe, like, what if you actually just did the Valentina text?
Yeah,
Like -2 and then minus 2 power? Like,
maybe just
what if you
minus
just
1,
did
but yeah.
that, right? Yeah, like, I don't know. Maybe that would work. I mean, that would definitely make her good. I think they probably can't do that because she's series 1, but like, come on, that's Emma Frost, dude.
Yeah.
Please.
I mean, 4/6 add a random card to your hand is unplayable, but like 4/7 discover, draw a card and make it cost 0 is playable. Like the difference is so
It's
big.
very large, yeah. Well, at least, Anti-Venom doesn't draw the card. But yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's free.
Marvel Snap is in the January patch going to be doubling the amount of tokens in Spotlight caches. They mentioned this was a band-aid change. I've talked about it a decent amount, but I don't think we've heard Lamby's take on it. I'll prime you with my take just so you know where I'm at on it. You can tell me if you think
Right?
I'm off base or on base. My take is that this is a smaller change than it looks like because it doesn't represent a big change in terms of the overall value of the cache, right? Like you're still going to be sad when you get this. It's only like, I don't know, a 4 or 8% increase in the overall EV of the cache, so it's pretty small. It looks bigger than it is. What I'm mostly optimistic about, in as much as I can be optimistic about anything related to Marvel Snap's economy, is that they explicitly said this is a band aid. We're doing better stuff later, but we're sick of waiting till that better stuff is done. Here is this change. And I'm kind of wanting to get your take on that generally.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm actually very curious what this better thing that they want to do is, right? Because like the funny thing about getting tokens out of your 4 caches is that whether it's 1,000 tokens or 2,000 tokens, and heck, even if it's potentially 3,000 tokens, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you open the tokens is still a feels bad thing.
Yes.
So when they changed it from 1,000 to 2,000, it's still gonna feel bad. But like I guess temporarily it feels less bad because you knew in the back of your mind it used to be 1,000. But once you get one, but no, it's true. It's a very human thing. But
No,
once you
it's
get used
definitely
to the
true. It's also funny though.
yeah, yeah, but once you get used to the 2,000 thing, you will be sad very quickly thereafter again. So I'm really also hoping that like the whatever change that they propose for the future might even do away with the whole potential chance of being a complete whiff. You know, like to me the tokens are a complete whiff to begin with, quote unquote.
Mm.
So maybe they'll do away with that. But like I guess this is definitely a step in the right direction. But it's not like you said, it's a band-aid, it's not exactly a cure because
Yeah.
it's just an illusion of like making it a bit better because like I said, right, at the end of the day, if you do hit the tokens, you will still be sad. Like once
Yes.
you get used to the fact that 2,000 tokens is the norm, you will continue to be sad.
Like if I need surgery and I also cut my finger and you give me a
Yeah.
band-aid for the finger, I still need the surgery. Like it's
Yes.
still gotta happen. So while I appreciate the band-aid, I appreciate that there's some recognition that this is not good. It's just like one of the things that people have been saying a lot to me that I've been struggling to wrap my head around is like, why didn't they do this earlier? Doesn't this seem very easy to do? And I don't really have a good response to that because it's like, why didn't they do this earlier? Like maybe they probably should have done this earlier. What stopped them from doing this earlier? What changed? And I guess that's something that like I wish I had a good answer to because I don't. This does feel like the kind of thing where it's like I'm pretty slow to advocate for people who are asking for just like more free stuff, right? Like I typically need a good reason to do that. But the second it was pointed out to me the degree of inflation and the sort of waiting on the Spotlight Caches Series 4 and 5 thing, I changed my tune on that and I was like, you know what? They actually probably should put more tokens in there to compensate for that because since we went from a premium mystery variant to 1,000 tokens, there has been changes in the structure of the system and now we actually probably should get more tokens because there's so many more cards there. And I was late to that. I actually feel. I feel like I was late to that. I feel like other people saw it before me, and I was like writing them off as just whining, and I didn't get it. And I guess what I'm wondering is what was their moment of clarity on that? I wish I knew because I know what mine was, and I wish I knew what theirs was.
I have this sneaky suspicion that I think they already knew. It's just that maybe they had a long list of things that they needed to like roll out, and this wasn't something that was like on the tip top of their list. But I think this I mean the fact that they can say like, all right, you can get 2,000 tokens now, and we're gonna be doing something in the future. Like if they can say this means that it's already in the plans, right? So maybe they already knew that this might have been an issue for some time.
Yeah, it's just I wish I knew. I wish I knew what changed. I wish I did because I
Same.
know what changed my perspective on this. And it was someone pointing out the drastic inflation in Series 5 and how those tokens were relatively less useful the larger that got, combined with the fact that we have weighting that says 66% Series 4 chance in that cache, making it more likely for you to get those tokens. Like all of that stuff, once it was pointed out to me and once it was like phrased to me in that context, I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, you're right.
Fair
And
point.
I just wonder if they had a conversation like that. I wonder if they were like, oh, damn, we got to do something about that. This one is, I think, inarguably the best change they've made to the economy in literally ever. And I realize it doesn't affect everybody, or even probably most people listening to this. The Series 3 acquisition rate double, where previously we were getting, when you're climbing up through Series 3, in every group of 9 caches, you will get 2 cards. Now, when you're climbing up through Series 3, in every group of 9 caches, you will get 4 cards. This means that you will complete Series 3 in half the time. Enormous buff. Big thumbs up. Extremely happy about it. And I don't really expect there to be much back and forth on this one with you because I don't know what opinion anyone could have on this other than good. We need more, but good job. Cutting the time to acquire Series 3 in half reduces one of the larger barriers in getting into Marvel Snap.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add on this one. As I said, like this is just a big W, right? Like because of the trickle down of like series drops, the series 3 pool is just gonna be like it's always gonna get bigger. So I feel like when I hit Series 3 for the first time like 2 years back, what I was like 3000-ish CL or something like that. So now it's like I think you mentioned to me it was like what, almost double, right?
I hit Series 3 complete in the beta at 2850 CL, I believe.
Okay,
And
okay,
I was late. Like I was like relatively unlucky, I believe.
okay.
And there were people who hit it as early as like 2500 CL.
Mm-hmm.
Now I am seeing it as far more common for it to be hit around 5000 CL or
Yeah,
above.
huge difference.
Huge difference. And this change should bring it back to about where it was at those levels in the beta, where it's like
Yeah, definitely a
3 to 4
good change.
months, you will complete Series 3. And it's actually slightly better because for us in the beta, completing Series 3 in 3 to 4 months, we didn't have access to, you know, getting Series 4 and 5 cards at the time because they didn't exist. So you could argue it's better or worse, but the point is you'll be more than Series 3 complete by the time you have that 2500 300 CL that it takes now, because you'll also have these spotlight cache opens, all of this stuff. And so by the time you hit 3000 CL, if you're smart with it, you might actually be able to make some real do some real damage to the metagame. Next up is the best tech card of the game, Red Guardian. Lamby, I'm going to pass this one off to you to start out.
All right, so I'm so glad that KM and I both just straight up agree that this is just the best tech card in the
Yeah.
game. So for me, Red Guardian has been the best tech card in the game for a long time, simply because it's a tech card that you don't have to use in a very specific situation. I think I've said this countless of times across countless of our videos, but Red Guardian is just basically a 3/5. It is a 3/5, point blank. But it is a 3/5 that could negate or remove the effect of your opponent's card. So why I talk about it in this manner is because a lot of the time tech cards like Shang-Chi, Shadow King, right, if it's cheaper or whatsoever, have a very specific use case. And the thing about Marvel Snap at its core is you have 6 turns, you want to spend your energy every turn, you want to put stuff on the board, you want to get points on the board, you want to win the game with the points. But the thing about tech cards is you don't get to play these cards until a specific point in the game if your opponent is playing a specific deck that can be countered by specific tech card. And often enough, tech cards have underpowered stats. Shang-Chi is a 4/3, Shadow King is a 2/2. Like, these are not good stats, right? The thing about Red Guardian is that, like, at baseline, it's a 3/5, so you don't really mind just playing the card whenever, wherever. But if you were to hit anything with a Red Guardian, that card is blank, right? So the beautiful thing about Red Guardian is it hits everything. And in the meta right now, we are obviously thinking of things like you hit Dracula's, you hit in the future, you hit Bruce
You
Banners,
hit
right? You
Doom
hit Doctor Doom
2099. Yeah.
2099s, yes. So like the thing is, we have a wide list of things that Red Guardian hits right now, which is why we're actually talking about it again. But like, even if there weren't that many targets for Red Guardian to hit, you can randomly put a Red Guardian in your deck just because you have a space, and it will work because it's a 3/5 with no downside. It's just a tech card that can be curved. It's so good.
It also, we talked about the different deck building requirements that all of those 4 drops have.
Mm-hmm.
And each of them wants you to be doing a different thing. None of them preclude Red Guardian. Doom
Yep.
2099, you can play Red Guardian. In your Anti-Venom deck, you can play Red Guardian. Your Galactic deck, you can play Red Guardian. In your Wiccan deck, you can play Red Guardian. And in fact, it's the one of the few tech options that those decks actually have available to them. The Doom 2099 and the Wiccan decks typically are unable to interact in meaningful ways, and Red Guardian gives them that ability to interact in meaningful ways. And that is what makes him so valuable for me. Is that this is the kind of card that without which you would lose to every resolved Madam Web 100% of the time. And now
Yep.
you don't. And like, it is the kind of card that can be in your deck dealing with whatever you need it to deal with while also being a good on curve play. And that is just such a valuable thing to have access to.
Yeah, I think just wanna add one simple explanation for the whole Red Guardian Wiccan thing and Red Guardian Doom 2099 thing. It's not just that it's a playable tech card in the deck. It's actually, I would say it's, to a certain extent, it's very staple because these decks cannot run interaction, right?
Yep.
Because their decks need to be built a certain way. Red Guardian is the literal like best on curve play for these decks, because like for example, if you don't have like a Zabu or Psylocke, you're gonna be playing something on turn 3, right? And that's the only time you can play a tech card before you play Doom 2099. So well, Red Guardian, right? And for Wiccan, it's very simple. You need to spend 3 mana before you play Wiccan, right? And then
Yeah.
that's like kind of the only time you can like, just throw out your Red Guardian, whatever it hits, it doesn't matter. Then you play your Wiccan, then you go from there. So it's like a bridge. It's like a tech card. It's also a bridge for the deck, and then it has interaction with your opponent's deck. Like I think Red Guardian and Wiccan and Doom 2099 decks kind of just solves a lot of their problems.
Speaking of problem solving, Lamby and I both agree that this metagame is a good one right now. Doom 2099 has raised the floor, but there are tons of decks that can jump over the floor. We have a metagame where traditional discard is just a good deck, which is that's really cool. It's just a really good deck right now. Lamby, you mentioned as we were coming up with topics for this that what you like about this metagame is that the sort of the floor is lower. And while Doom 2099 did raise that, it's not raising it to the level of, say, a Hela. A Hela deck being an example of a deck that is just like prohibitively raising the floor so high that not a lot of decks can jump over it. Where Doom 2099 raises it to a point where decks can jump over it. Which, in your opinion, has given us a rise of a non-wombo combo meta. And I just want you to elaborate on that point a little bit.
Yeah, I think this topic is not so much about, it's not supposed to be super deep, but I just want to say like this is my preferred style of playing the game, which is I we mentioned before like we randomly mentioned last time like let these two cards fight. Like I in general in Marvel Snap I like decks that get to fight with each other. Like I don't want to play a game of Marvel Snap whereby I'm just doing my own thing, you're doing your own thing. No one like plays cards like to outpower the other person. Like like if you're playing something like Tribunal, you're just doing your own thing the whole game. Like, I really hate Tribunal because it's a bit like Hela but worse, because you just do your own thing the whole game regardless of what your opponent does. You just do the same thing every single game regardless of what your opponent does. I don't really like that kind of thing. I prefer decks that like they compete on points. Competing on points is one of the ways that decks interact with each other. And like I think now the meta is in the spot whereby every deck has like an ability to just like outpower each other in a non-combo way. So I just kind of really like where the meta is right now. Like we mentioned in like the last 7 topics, practically there's like so many things you can play right now, and most of them don't involve like a specific combination. Like there's no combo. It's just like actually just playing cards with stats, and I really like that.
I also think this is a point at which I can reinforce, like, specifically what it is about Hela that bothered me and draw some analogies to some decks that exist right now. The things that bother me the most are when there is a highly played deck that says you must be this tall to ride, and there aren't a lot of decks that can get over it. And so it is very bothersome to me when that happens. And now Hela is the example of that, where it's just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do to tech against this deck. There's no package I can play. I have to change my deck entirely. I can't do anything to make my matchup marginally better. I either win because I'm bigger than them, or I don't. And Doom 2099 is like if they did Hela, but it wasn't Hela, right? Like if Hela with a lower floor, right? Because it just isn't doing as many points in that way, and it is more vulnerable to tech. It's vulnerable to things like US Agent. You'll just instantly lose a lane on that. It's vulnerable to Hazmat Ajax stuff. It's vulnerable to things. And that level of card, like, this is why Doom 2099 was scary to me, because if he was a little bit stronger, like if that card came out a little bit stronger, it would be Hela. But it didn't, so it isn't. And I think Move Bounce is another example of one of those decks where it's like, if that starts to be the thing, 25% of the meta is on, that gets really bad because there's not a lot of good ways to interact with it. You can do it if you want to do like your Invisible Woman Killmonger stuff, that'll work. But there's not a lot of really easy ways to make your matchup marginally better. It's either it does or it doesn't. Either you win because you tech carded them appropriately, or you absolutely get blown out by points. And those are the dynamics I like the least in Marvel Snap whenever they show up. And so I'm very grateful, weirdly, that Doom 2099 managed to be a you must be this tall to ride card, that there are a bunch of decks that are tall enough to ride. I think that's just something that, like, it could have gone very wrong, and I'm glad that it didn't. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching this episode of 8 Cubes. I've been KM Best. He has been Lamby Series, and he will continue to be Lamby Series, and he's going to take us out right now.
Thank you so much, guys, for being here with us. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys on the next video. Bye-bye.
I just saluted with both hands. That's not a thing.
Just do it, man.